On BBC One shortly, there's a fond look back at the life of the man who gave animals a voice, the late Johnny Morris.
Ladies and gentlemen, direct from the bar, Dean Martin.
Standing on a corner, watching all the girls go by.
A true Hollywood hero.
Looked like a movie star even when he wasn't one.
A personification of easy-living 50s America.
Marilyn Monroe, JFK, everybody was there.
Central to the Rat Pack.
Would you mind working with Marlon Brando? I said, are you drunk? Would I mind?
Omnibus reveals the real Dean Martin tomorrow at 10:45 on BBC One.
Nigel Williams exercises those little grey cells here on BBC Two in half an hour as he investigates the Queen of Crime, Agatha Christie, in tonight's Great Detectives.
You have one new message. Did you know you might be risking the following? Radiation exposure, changes in brain function, tumours from your mobile phone. You have no more messages.
Panorama, the mobile mystery, tomorrow at 10:05 on BBC One.
This is BBC Two and the Money Programme.
Tonight, the strong pound. Is British industry learning to love it? Barclays cut 6,000 jobs. The man who would be its new boss tells us why. And how can Britain's retailing royalty regain their lost crowns? Good evening. For many months now, sections of British industry have been complaining loudly about the damaging effects of a strong pound. It makes our exports uncompetitive, they say, and costs jobs, profits and investment. But with the Bank of England's eyes fixed firmly on meeting the government's inflation target, interest rates have been slow to come down. So sterling stays strong and British exporters continue to suffer. But does this view strictly accord with reality? In order to find out, we've been back to see the Chudleys. Regular viewers may remember them as the Northampton family who owns and runs a range of businesses. 3 months ago, they were cautious about a recession and had some concerns about the strong pound. What's happened to them since? Steve Levinson's been finding out.
In the previous episode of the Chudleys, we discovered Britain's most enterprising family, all 40 of them. They run businesses both large and small. They employ 600 and have sales of £30 million a year. They know what's going on locally in Northampton and in the wider economy. Back in January, they shared with us their hopes and fears for the future. We met Victoria, maker of baby shoes. She hoped to double her sales every month. Robin, who makes food packaging, he thought business would be exciting but tough. And Tim, who runs a conference centre and was quite cautious about the future. We caught up with them at another family gathering. Lunch at Victoria's.
Hi! Come in!
4 months ago, as the pound began its latest climb, their optimism was in sharp contrast to the gloom of many pundits. So how are they getting on?
The expectations for the first quarter were reasonable, and I don't think we really met them. They were disappointing to a certain degree, but not seriously.
January was dreadful, and I really rather thought I put my foot in it. But February, miraculously, doubled, which was fantastic. March was brilliant as well, so I've had and April, three very, very good months.
1 or 2 of the bookings that we were concerned about did cancel, so we didn't achieve the figures that we were hoping to. But it hasn't been, by no means a disaster, and it's certainly picking up again now.
As it turned out, the family was right, the pundits wrong. There was no recession and the economy's growing again. I was invited to join them for lunch, but as I discovered from the chat around the table, just as one problem recedes, another one has become a big topic for debate. Since we were last here, the pound has soared, and with it the anguish of British exporters. Some think manufacturing industry is being strangled to death. Others say it's just a familiar old whinge from inefficient companies. Once again, the Chudley family empire might have some light to shed on the subject. How are they coping with a pound that's going through the roof? Stuart Harper married into the Chudleys. He's been running his own small engineering works in the Northamptonshire village of Brixworth for 26 years.
I wouldn't say I was a particularly good businessman. I'm a craftsman. I'm probably the only member of the family that gets my hands dirty.
Despite the ramshackle appearance, components are made here for many high-tech industries, including defence, oil exploration and Formula One racing cars. He doesn't export, but many of his customers do. In the last few months, turnover's dropped by a third, and he blames the high pound.
If it carries on like this, I think there's going to be a lot of engineering firms closing. I mean, I'm getting catalogues for auctions nearly every week of engineering firms that are closing down. It's not good.
Stuart is probably the most pessimistic Chudley, but others around the lunch table refuse to be downhearted. The pound may be uncomfortably high, but there are foreign markets out there to be conquered. At least one member of the family thinks now is the time to expand overseas. This exhibition in London is a chance for Victoria to display her wares before a worldwide audience. Her boutique business, called Daisy Roots, has grown fast since she set it up 4 years ago. Recently, she won her first overseas contract to supply 800 pairs of shoes to Malaysia. And since her last appearance on the Money programme, she's been approached by a Spanish distributor. That deal's still on, if the pound behaves.
Although he loves the product, he thinks he can sell it in Spain, but he's very worried about the pound. And if it moves any further up, it will not be economically viable for him to distribute them in Spain.
But even with exchange rate swings, there are other deals to be done. International buyers are here, among them an Australian husband and wife team on the lookout for something original and intrigued by the footwear on Victoria's stand. Before long, it's clear there may be another overseas order on the cards.
Pastels and some brights, maybe the little animals.
The initial deal is for a dozen samples of Daisy Roots shoes, which will be offered to stores in Melbourne.
The price might be a little bit higher due to the sterling, but I don't think we could probably overcome that. Maybe not in the large volumes to begin with, but I'm sure that at least we can bring them into the Australian market, which really is that's why we're here.
So the current level of the exchange rate, the UK exchange rate, doesn't deter you from coming here to do business?
It's not deterring us, and if it stays where it's at for a little while, then for the next season that's coming through, I think it should be quite good.
An exhibition like this one shows that small specialist companies can do well even at today's exchange rate. But the question for other parts of the Chudley family empire and for British industry as a whole is whether bigger manufacturers can pull off the same trick. The biggest Chudley business is the food wrappings company. It has 200 staff and turnover of nearly £20 million a year. Robin, who runs it, has also decided to go international.
We want to grow our business, and we're enthusiastic about growing it. If we can prove that we can service a need in the European market now, and we can be economic and do our best to be competitive, then we stand a great chance for the future.
Robin's company, FFP, is investing millions in new equipment. It has to in order to compete overseas.
How's it looking, Mark?
Yeah, not so bad.
This new computer receives digital artwork by phone from customers. It makes printing plates at half the cost and 5 times as fast as more traditional methods. This is the key to keeping prices down while the pound goes up. But there's another new weapon in Robin's armoury, a one-man export drive.
And see you next month.
Take care.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Guy Joy, recently appointed as Robin's man in Europe. His first mission, to sell food packaging to the French. He knows the industry and he speaks the language.
They have decided to employ me because I have a knowing of the French customers and I have many contacts. So we can hope for the next month to have many more customers.
Only 2 months into the job and Guy's made a killing. A serial killing. 7 Day is a rapidly growing French maker of breakfast cereals. Much of its output is own brand labels for British supermarkets like Asda. Previously, it relied on locally made packaging, but since February, it's been using these new self-sealing bags from FFP.
Et aux produits, nous avons vu qu'il y aurait peut-être des choses à améliorer.
Guy has persuaded 7 Day's chief buyer to import FFP's new printed wrappings. To do so, he matched the local competition on price and offered a more advanced product.
I think they can be and they are competitive with other suppliers from Europe, and it's our job with FFP and 7 Day to find the best compromise with price, quality and service.
This deal is living proof of what can be done at current exchange rates and in the heart of Europe, where the pound has gone up by more than 6% since the start of the year. And if the Chudleys can come here and beat the local competition, maybe it's a sign that the strong pound isn't quite the handicap it's often made out to be. Back in Britain, Stewart and manufacturers like him might not like a strong pound, but there's not much they can do about it. Visiting him in Brixworth, the local man from the Engineering Employers Federation can offer little comfort.
Well, Stewart, Nigel Chubb. Nice to meet you. How are things going at the moment?
After complaining bitterly for years about a high pound, industry bodies now admit the pound could stay high for a long time to come. So the updated message to manufacturers is, you must learn to cope.
Realistically, they have to plan on today's circumstances, and that is that the pound looks if it's going to stay at about this level, at least until perhaps 2001, 2002. But they would hope that government policies in particular would help nudge the pound downwards to make them more competitive. But that is more in sort of hope. The realistic situation is they've got to take long-term business decisions at the pound at this level.
So the new reality is that industry will have to live with a strong pound. It could stay that way for years. But as the Chudleys show, you can survive and even thrive on it.
I would hope to enlarge my share of the world market. I'd like to export more through trade outlets and through direct mail on the internet.
I shall stay in business, but I think a lot of manufacturers will go out of business. I mean, if it carries on for too long, in 5 years' time, I can't see there being a lot of engineering about.
Well, we would hope that in Europe there might be 4 or 5 customers, and each of them might be spending annually £100,000 on packaging, and that would be a really good start.
Steve Levinson reporting. Now, what in the world is going on at Barclays? Once the leader of the pack in the high street, it's been hit by a wave of troubles as it struggles to keep its place in a crowded market with more sophisticated customers. It's yet to find a permanent chief executive, having lost 2 since last November, one to a controversial boardroom coup and the other to ill health. And to top it all, it's just announced it's making 6,000 people redundant, 1/10 of its staff. That's a big strategic decision to take with the top job yet to be filled. It's a question I put to Barclays Chief Executive of Retail Financial Services, John Varley.
Well, it is a big decision, but I think that the origins of it are very clear. I mean, the origins of it are in what I see as a sea change in the industry in financial services in the United Kingdom. And it's a decision that we have been working on for some time. And the fact that there isn't a Group Chief Executive to replace Mike O'Neill, although we have an acting Group Chief Executive who also happens to be our chairman, Peter Middleton, is, as I see it, neither here nor there.
So who's going to get the top job?
Well, when Mike O'Neill tragically had to retire from the industry as a result of his illness, the team on the board who had been responsible for selecting him got to work again, initiated another search, and that search is well advanced. There's a short list. It includes some internal candidates, some external candidates.
Yourself included?
I imagine that I am on that list, yes.
Would you want to be on the list?
Well, of course I would. It's a fantastic job.
Well, let's look at your strategy. How does cutting 6,000 jobs help your customers?
What we have to concentrate on as much as anything is how we can offer a range of choice of access to our customers so that they can choose to access us in any way that they want to. Now, for lots of our customers, the overwhelming majority indeed, they want to be served through the high street branches. But there are a growing number who choose to come to us through the telephone or come to us through the internet. And I think what that's indicating is that the way in which customers choose to behave, the way in which they choose to shop for financial services, is changing.
Okay, well that goes back to the original point. Why are you sacking 6,000 staff if customers want a more personalised service?
One of the things that customers want is a fast decision. Lots of them find the business of shopping for financial services quite intimidating, and they want to have a rapid decision. And we are using technology to ensure that when our customers come into the branch off the high street, they can get an immediate decision about a mortgage or an immediate decision about a loan.
Well, if you say you're giving customers what they want, then why has the government instituted the Cruikshank inquiry into banking services which customers are obviously unhappy about?
Well, I think that Cruikshank is a wide-ranging review of the industry. What he's trying to do is to look at the role that banks play in the British economy and to satisfy himself and thereby the government that the levels of competition are sufficiently broad and extensive. Now, I think that the step that we took last week is a very clear indication of the intensely competitive environment in financial services in the United Kingdom. And it isn't just as though it's banks who are competing in financial services, because there are lots of non-bank competitors on the high street who offer consumer loans and who offer cards. So the barriers to entry in this market, as I know as well as anybody, are very low. And that enables and has fueled intense competition in the market over the years.
You're obviously going through a bad patch. You've lost one chief executive in a boardroom coup. You've lost his replacement. Aren't you very vulnerable?
You might say that we were going through a bad patch if we lacked the confidence to take the bold strategic steps that we have taken over the last 6 months since Martin Taylor resigned. And if I hadn't taken those bold strategic steps with my colleagues in Barclays, then in a year's time you might be saying to me, why is it that all of a sudden your competitive edge has been blunted, Mr. Varley? Now, it's very clear to me the future direction of this industry. It's very clear to me what our customers want. And in a sense, whether we have a chief executive, a permanent chief executive, or whether we don't, is a matter of supreme indifference to our customers. They want us serving them day by day, hour by hour, on the high street, down the internet line, by telephone, and that's what I'm trying to achieve for them.
John Varley of Barclays. And Barclays are not the only big high street name to hit trouble recently. Just this week, Marks & Spencer revealed a collapse in profits, and Mothercare announced the closure of dozens of shops. Meanwhile, Sainsbury's and Laura Ashley have also been wrestling with their own well-publicised problems. So why has the retailing royalty apparently been dethroned? In a moment, I'll be putting that to one of the UK's most successful shopkeepers. But first, Karen Hoggan charts the course of the retail revolution.
It's a tough time to be a mass-market retailer. Always bitterly fought, the trolley wars have intensified over the last few months. Sales slumps, profits warnings and mega mergers have thrown the industry into turmoil. Some of the biggest names on the high street have come unstuck. It's so bad, the question's now being asked, will they all survive into the next century? September 1998, and a taste of what was to come at Marks & Spencer, former darling of the city. One of the first clues that something was horribly wrong came with the news that M&S was to cut costs by shifting more manufacturing abroad. But worse followed, a boardroom row over a new chief executive. It was eventually resolved, but not before the chain had been forced to wash a lot of its dirty underwear in public. Along the way, it became clear M&S was taking its customers for granted. The result, plummeting sales.
Marks in many ways has become a victim of its own success. For years it's been a benchmark of best retail practice. This has bred a certain amount of arrogance, a certain amount of complacency among its management, and they've taken their eye off the ball. They've lost contact with their customers, they have underestimated their competition and not really tracked the competition nearly closely enough.
Come October, and another top name on the high street in trouble.
You see this, and this, and this, they're part of
Sainsbury's, running its new Value to Shout About advertising campaign, admitted sales just hadn't been growing fast enough. The ads didn't help, and ultimately it became clear they had failed to convince shoppers to spend more.
If you can buy this cheaper at any other supermarket, then Sainsbury's will refund twice the difference.
The rot first set in years ago. Sainsbury's came embarrassingly late to loyalty schemes, launching its reward card 18 months after Tesco. Since then, it's been branded a follower, not a leader.
Retail is a very fast-paced industry. If you don't stay at the forefront of your industry, regardless of the sector or the format or the brand that you're operating with, then consumers and competitors will pass you by.
March 1999, and rumours that Walmart, the world's biggest retailer, wanted to set up shop in Britain, put globalisation on the agenda. Shortly afterwards, DIY to toiletries giant Kingfisher merged with Asda to further their international expansion. It reinforced the view that going abroad is crucial for shop chains' long-term success. Retailers who haven't yet ventured overseas risk being left behind.
We would certainly say that the window of opportunity to participate in the Global Super League is narrow and closing rapidly. And there's no question that there will be a first-mover advantage in most sectors. So if you're not considering how you're going to move abroad, if you already aren't doing it, that window of opportunity will be closed.
But it's not easy to succeed in foreign markets. Marks & Spencer has just announced its overseas stores lost it more than £14 million last year. It isn't alone in struggling abroad. Laura Ashley sold its flagging American shops for just $1 earlier this year. The key to retailers' success, however, remains how they do in the home market. The trouble is, it's tougher here than it's ever been. Shoppers are becoming more demanding. If they don't get what they want, they can and do take their business elsewhere. Shops that don't keep their customers loyal can see their company's fortunes transformed almost overnight. March also brought a glimpse of what retailers will have to do to keep customers loyal. This is Bluewater Park in Kent, which opened amid much hype. The biggest shopping centre in the country, some say its approach to retailing is the way of the future. Faced with the threat of buying on the internet, it knows it's got to make shopping fun. Otherwise, customers will stay away.
I would say from a Bluewater shopping perspective that shopping is leisure. So for me, going along the high street and buying a piece of clothing for myself or a gift for my wife, is that leisure or is that shopping? Whether you're with your family who may be shopping or whether you're here with friends, having a play or going to the cinemas, that is what we call leisure. So in that sense, Bluewater is a leisure centre.
Some of the largest retailers, however, have failed to satisfy consumers enough. Storehouse owner of baby and toddler shop Mothercare and BHS is one. It's announced dismal results with falling sales and the closure of 68 Mothercare shops. And the market's going to get harder for all retailers.
I think we are seeing a fundamental shift in the pattern of retailing. I think that we're seeing a shift to the idea of the customer being king, to that being a reality, and retailers who don't truly embrace their customer as the absolute, unequivocal key player in their business really haven't got much chance of succeeding.
This week it became clear M&S, for one, hadn't been doing this. Its annual profits slumped by almost half, and the chain admitted it had lost touch with customers. It promised in the future to put them first. It sounds so simple, but as some of the biggest high street names know, it's difficult to get it right.
Karen Hogan there. Well, I'm joined now by Ian McLaurin, who was head of Tesco till 1997, turned the business round and has just written a book about it. He's currently chairman of Vodafone. Ian McLaurin, what's the most important key to being a successful retailer?
Well, it's a very simple key. Keep close to your customers. Don't let them out of your sight. Have focus groups running all the time and learn what your customers are saying about your shop and other shops. And once you've got all that running, then you've got to communicate very clearly to your staff. So customers and staff, don't let them out of your sight.
It's interesting that you mentioned in your book that you wanted Tesco to be, at that time, the M&S of the food business.
No, we unashamedly, in 1977, when we came out of stamps, said, you know, M&S are the great retailers and we want to try and get like them.
So what is it that M&S hasn't done? Because if they set the standard then, why have they fallen down?
As an outsider looking in, on their food side, which 8 or 10 years ago was unrivaled, you can now buy chilled foods and wines in Sainsbury and Tesco and Safeway that are just as good and probably cheaper. The service in the supermarkets, I think, is very good. I've often been into M&S stores where the tills have been closed, and that causes a great deal of resentment from the customers. In this day and age, you have to look to see whether you should take credit cards or not. From outside, I think it's extraordinary that they don't take credit cards, but they must have a reason for it, but maybe they will in a few months or years' time.
You overtook a very successful rival, Sainsbury's, in your bid to, as you say, keep your customers happy. What was it that Sainsbury's is doing, or what has it lost as far as the formula is concerned?
I think Sainsbury's lost touch with their customers. I think that they didn't move with the times. When Tesco introduced loyalty cards, the chairman of Sainsbury's said they were nothing more than electronic Green Shield stamps, and that sent out a very clear signal to us that they weren't close to their customers, because we knew at that time that our customers were saying, we like your store very much, but what can you do for us that just gives us that little bit extra? So we introduced Club Card, the most successful card, I think, in the country, over 10 million customers now. 18 months later, Sainsbury introduced their own card, but 18 months too late.
The interesting thing is you mentioned it in your book, it's a bit of a chicken and egg argument, because is it the idea that you're giving customers what they want? Is it that what drives it, or do retailers create the new market?
I think retailers are creating the new market, but customers are very sophisticated now, and they know what they want, and they're not backward in coming forward in saying this is what we want out of your store.
What's the next big thing then in shopping? I mean, where are you going to see, I mean, internet. Is the internet going to, for example, revolutionize the way we shop? Are we going to see the shutdown of the traditional shopping centre?
No, I don't think that at all. I think internet is going to have a significant part to play. There's no doubt at all about that for busy people like yourself who would very much take advantage of that sort of shopping. But I think you've got to realise that people are living longer, they're retiring earlier, and it might sound silly to you and me, but shopping for them is a leisure activity. They like to drive out to the superstore, park their car, fill their car up with petrol, use a coffee shop, and have this wonderful range of merchandise available to them.
And finally, who's going to win the World Cup?
Well, as chairman of the England and Wales Cricket Board, it just has to be England, doesn't it?
I suppose we'll have to leave it on that note. Ian McLaurin, thank you very much. And that's all from the Money Programme for this week. But don't forget to join us on our website, www.bbc.co.uk/Money Programme. And here on BBC Two next Sunday evening. Till then, good night.
It's far from elementary next night here on BBC Two as another great detective comes under the magnifying glass.
A man that won and lost 6 World Championship titles, made and spent over $4 million, and in 200 professional fights, all he really wanted to do was dance.
I've never enjoyed boxing. It's just a business with me.
His name was Sugar Ray Robinson. Square up to the man that danced in the ring. Reputations is tomorrow at 9:30 on BBC Two.
If you don't have a voice, you don't have a history.
The Falklands Victory Parade hid its war disabled. They didn't suit the image.
Secrets.
Bill Surrey was locked away when he was 7 years old. He spent his life locked away.
Secrets.
The report coined a term for the institutionalized disabled. It called them the socially dead.
Isn't it time you knew the truth? Disabled Century, 9:50 Thursday on BBC Two.
Now on BBC Two, from dear Aunt Jane to that annoying Belgian, it's the simple question of who done it.